Welcome to the Rockabye Revenue Podcast with me, Abby Watson. I'm a mum of 4 and a business strategist, and I train people to become hypnobirthing teachers. In the last decade, I've built a thriving baby business that grew beyond my wildest dreams. This podcast is for you if you run a business or dream of running a business in the birth and baby industry. You want to change lives whilst making more money. I'm talking about creating sustainable income whilst being present for the people that matter most. I believe for our baby businesses to have the impact we desire, we must be rewarded. On this podcast, expect me to share actionable strategies without the jargon. I've been where you are. I've built a business while raising 4 little ones, and now I'm here to help you turn your passion into profit while creating the life you've always dreamed of. So let's get started. Hello, gorgeous one. How are you doing? Welcome back to another episode of Rockabye Revenue. If you're watching this on YouTube, you'll see that I'm sat in a different location. What am I doing? Well, I'm just trying to find the most comfortable position in my house that actually receives decent internet. So I'm experimenting today, and I'm sat on a rather comfy chair, and I'm like blending in with all my muted tones. Anyway, I hope you're all having a fabulous week. I am here to talk about something that perhaps has crossed your mind many, many times before. Maybe it's even one of the things that has stopped you from making progress because you are yet to decide whether your classes are going online or whether they are going to be in person. And we are talking about this today because last week was my client catch-up, my student and graduates monthly catch-up, and this was one of the questions. One of our very new members of Love Your Birth, a new student, asked the very common question, what do clients want? Do they want to go and do their classes online, or do they want to go to in-person classes? And it made me think, I need to talk about this, because wherever you are at in your business, there will definitely be times where you'll think, okay, but should I run this online, or actually should I make this an in-person offering? And sometimes we can procrastinate on that far too much. Anyway, do you know what? When I started my business 10 years ago, this was never, ever a question I asked myself. And I don't think many other hypnobirthing teachers did either. It was just almost a given that when you teach hypnobirthing, you offer your classes in person. And I'm sure that is the case for so many similar business owners too. You know, if you're a baby massage teacher, if you're a sleep consultant, if you teach antenatal classes, I'm sure if you started your business like a decade ago, it was just a given that you were going to run it in person. And then what happened was, as you will know, 5 years ago, the blooming pandemic happened. So I remember March 2020, hearing the news of the lockdown, and I made a statement online that all my classes would pause, because let's face it, at the time I thought this thing was just going to last maybe a couple of weeks, you know? But like many business owners, I made the statement online that my business was pausing until we had normality. Ha ha ha, how we laugh. How we laugh at that naivety that I just thought, yeah, I'd be pausing for a couple of weeks, have a bit of downtime, and then life would just plod on as normal. Well, as you will know, that crazy time lasted a very, very long time. So I did pause my business for a little bit. And I did see other businesses announce that they were going to take their classes online, that they were going to start offering their one-on-one services via video call, that they were going to host their groups via group video call. And my initial thought was, no way. I did not jump on the bandwagon at all. I was like, no way. Like, the whole vibe would be lost online. The impact, the relaxation, the kind of immersive experience that is a hypnobirthing course would be completely lost if I was to take my classes online. So I didn't. And then I kept getting inquiries from people. Oh, are you running classes? And I was saying, no, I'm not running online courses. Hopefully I'll be back running soon. Let me take your details and I'll get in touch once I'm back running. And I sat and I thought to myself, why am I feeling like I can't run classes? And I really think it was coming from a place of perfectionism, feeling like, well, if I can't do it properly, I'm not going to do it at all. And also, as well, struggling with change and the fear of the unknown. I'd never run a class online. I definitely classed myself as a big, giant technophobe. So even the logistics of how I was going to do it felt completely alien to me. And that scared me and it froze me into inaction. And then I had a little word with myself and I thought, you know what? There are many extremely fearful, expectant parents out there now more than ever. These women had been having, what they thought was a regular pregnancy experience, and suddenly the world went into this lockdown and they were hearing stories of having to arrive at hospital on their own, having to birth without birth partners, all this awful, scary stuff. And as much as I felt like, oh my gosh, these are challenges that, I've never covered when I trained as a hypnobirthing teacher, I don't know how to explain how that'll be okay, because it won't be. And then I thought, well, actually, some support is better than no support. So to cut a long story short, I did eventually take my classes online. So I got back in touch with those inquiries and I said, yes, I would be running online courses. I would be teaching one-on-one online, and that's how I started first of all. So literally, I put up an ironing board in the spare room. I put my laptop on it. And I ran Zoom sessions from that ironing board and chair. And that's how I got going with online sessions. And you know what? It worked. It worked. I definitely think there were some downsides, like that lovely connection of going to someone's home and teaching them hypnobirthing and getting shown around their nursery and getting fed biscuits and cup of teas. That wasn't happening. I was literally sat in my spare room with an ironing board in front of me and a laptop. That wasn't happening. But actually, the ability to create relationships, the ability to teach the course was absolutely still there. So then I went on and started again offering my group courses online. And I continued doing that through the whole of the pandemic. And it taught me a very big lesson. We can adapt, and actually our services can go online and they can be incredibly effective and incredibly impactful. And I wasn't alone. So many business owners were now offering their services online, including baby classes that I attended with my youngest daughter. My youngest was 10 months when we went into lockdown, so the wonderful baby sensory classes that I'd loved going to in person now went online. And although it wasn't quite as magical, it was that bit of magic at home when life felt pretty crazy. So many business owners were taking their classes online, and so many people were finding that it worked and that there were some benefits, you know? When I was running my group courses, I didn't have to pay venue fees. Yes, I had to pay a small amount to Zoom for my license, but beyond that, that was it. So I was saving money on venues. I was not having to provide biscuits, refreshments, all this kind of thing kind of was taken off me as an extra thing to sort out and do, which was great, you know? I also found that people were joining my classes from further afield. You know, I was getting clients that were actually 40 miles away, sometimes at the other end of the country, sometimes even abroad. So it was making my sessions much more accessible. However, I really don't want to sugarcoat this and just present the upsides to online. There were definitely some downsides. I don't think I quite enjoyed hosting my classes quite as much when they were online. You know, I did love that in-person vibe. I did love the amount of just general chit-chat that often comes with being in a physical room with people. I loved the way that the clients would interact with each other more intimately when they were physically in a room together. I loved the fact that I got out of my house, you know? So when I do a one-on-one course with a client, I would get out of my chaotic home full of toddlers and go somewhere else. And I loved that. You know, I was out of mum mode and I was in this mode of, you know, a travelling hypnobirthing teacher. Blooming loved it, you know? And when it was online, I was literally, like I say, upstairs in the spare room with an ironing board and hearing the chaos that was unfolding downstairs. Yeah. So there was some definite things that I lost when I took my services online. So here we are now, you know, 5 years since the start of the pandemic, yet there has definitely been this shift in services like ours. So whether you are listening to this as a hypnobirthing teacher, as someone that runs baby classes, as an antenatal educator, as a sleep consultant, whatever it may be, you will have seen a shift in your industry where actually there's now a real mix of how people access services like yours. There's a mix of people doing it old school and literally going out to meet their clients, having that in-person experience. And there's the more kind of recent approach of people doing it online, okay? And you will definitely see out there two camps. You know, there are business owners that are like, nope, my services are very much online, that's how I operate, I don't do in person. And there's the other camp, you know, that are very much like, oh no, I'm not on board with online. You know, if I can, you know, teach someone or support someone in person, I'm going to pass them to someone else. And then, of course, there's the middle ground people, you know, that do a bit of both. So today, we're here to talk about what is best for your business, what approach you want to have. Now, ultimately, when I was asked this question at our monthly catch-up recently, the question was, what do clients prefer? Okay, so rather than asking me, what should I do? Should I do online or should I do in person? The question was, what do clients prefer? Whoops, my book's just fallen over. If you heard a bang, that's what it was. So what do clients prefer? And there is no easy answer to that, because ultimately everyone's different. Everyone's different. There are people that will actively look for online stuff, and there will be people that want it in person. So, there is no definitive answer to that question, okay? So the real question is, what do you want to do? What do you want to do? Because how is it going to work with your life and your view of your business? And secondly, what do the types of people that you attract in your service want? Because like everything in life, everyone's different, aren't they? And if I was looking for a certain service, I might want it to be a certain way. But if my sister was looking for that same service, she might want it in a way that's very different to me. Like I said, we are all different. So if your view of your business is very much you want your business to be very much about community, it is absolutely possible to build community online. It might be, though, a little bit easier in person, And certainly when it comes to mums and babies, expectant mothers, having that ability to be with someone in a space can be easier to create that connection, for sure, Online, it needs a bit more creativity, it needs a bit more planning, it needs more logistics to make that happen, because it's not going to happen as naturally. So whilst I'm not saying it's impossible, what I am saying is if community is the forefront of your business, you may want to consider more in-person classes. And if you are considering online, you're going to have to think about how you can almost engineer the community for your clients. Now, I would say there's a whole group of people that are gagging for in-person stuff. I think I'm one of them, Some people have got real Zoom fatigue. And I guess a real good demonstration of that is whenever we run our annual in-person events at Love Your Birth, people are biting our hands off to come. And not only because it's a gorgeous day, but I definitely think people are craving that in-person connection with like-minded people. So when we had our last Inspiration Day, which is a lovely day for our community of students and graduates, we had people travel as far as Ireland. I even had one of my incredible clients join us from Bahrain. And why is that? Because being in a room of people that are like you and have the same values and motivations is pretty magical. So post-pandemic, because so many services have gone online and some have stayed online, I definitely think there is a huge call for that in-person magic. And if anything, if so many services in your niche are online, actually the fact that you are doing it in person could be a real selling point, a real draw to go with you rather than somebody else, because it's a special vibe and it's not something that we get everywhere. So that's definitely something to consider. Now, so many of the services that we offer as baby business owners, whether you are a baby massage instructor, whether you teach hypnobirthing, antenatal classes, whatever, yes, what we offer is, a way for people to learn things, It's more than that. It's an experience, So when I think about teaching hypnobirthing, yes, I really get that clients come quite clueless perhaps about childbirth and they leave knowing so much, and as a result they're feeling so much more confident about their baby's birth, and perhaps even their mindset might have shifted and suddenly they're feeling less fearful and more confident and more kind of like ready and calm and just at ease with the whole process. But as well as that, they have experienced a wonderful thing that has helped them connect with their baby, help them take time out of their daily life, and they've ultimately had something that they're going to remember, those sessions. They're going to remember, not just because of the information, but because of the experience and how it made them feel. So, in person can absolutely enhance that experience. So if you are a business owner that is going to run their courses in person, you can absolutely think about scents, the setup of the room, the vibe of the room, the way that you look after your clients physically. So much easier in person than online. So if that is something that's important to you, I definitely think about, I was going to say online, think about in person, because it's definitely much easier to create that experience. And let's face it, we are in a time where people pay for experiences, I'm recording this on the 21st of October. So many people on my social media have been picking pumpkins. They've not gone to Aldi and picked a £1 pumpkin, have they? They've gone to that muddy field with the, lovely pumpkin decorations, the smell of, lovely freshly brewed coffee. And they've done it because it's an experience as opposed to picking up a £1 pumpkin in Aldi. They're paying for the experience. They're paying perhaps 60 quid for their whole family to enjoy that muddy autumnal experience. So you get what I'm saying? Like, experiences are valuable. So your course, your service probably isn't just about the thing that you do with your clients, the information or, the thing that you teach them. It's actually about a rounded experience. So if you are thinking about online versus in person, you might think about, can this experience be delivered well online as opposed to in person? Because that might influence the decision that you make. Now, another consideration can absolutely be your own life, I know business owners that only ever work online, and that is because they know that their own lifestyle makes it very tricky for them to work in person. So perhaps it's because they don't drive, or it's because of a disability that means that getting about is more challenging. It might be because of their family dynamic. So they might have a baby that's breastfed and the baby needs to feed every hour and a half. So going out of the house for a number of hours would be very tricky for them. But logging into Zoom and taking a well-planned break to go and breastfeed your baby might be more possible. So thinking about your own family dynamic or your own personal dynamic can absolutely factor in your decision. And let's face it, that might be ever changing. That situation might be ever changing. So your decision to go online might be forever, or it might be temporarily whilst you are in a certain season of your life, and that's totally okay. And that's leads me on beautifully to talk about how there is a middle ground with this. You know, you don't have to choose one or another. Yes, if you're offering like group classes, you need to decide. But if you are offering one-to-one services with clients, you don't even need to write whether it's in person or online. You can make that offering on a case by case basis. So for example, if you're a hypnobirthing teacher that teaches one-on-one, or if you offer sleep consultancy, if that's your profession, like, you don't have to say, my in-person services, my one-on-one services are in person. You don't have to say that. You can talk about your one-on-one services, and when someone inquires, you can make a decision based on where that person lives and their own circumstances too, or what times work for that person. Because sometimes you might have clients that are going to need it online, you know? They might be very far from your home, or they might have circumstances which means that if they were to do a course in the evening, they wouldn't be able to travel for that because they've got younger children upstairs in bed. You know, so these decisions can absolutely be made on a case-by-case basis, considering your own circumstances at that time and your clients too. So don't feel that, you know, you have to make a decision that is going to be how you operate your business forever. Actually, you can just be flexible, you know. I even know people who run group courses. You know, they run group courses, and if somebody can't attend that group course in person, they actually can attend via video link. Perfectly possible. You know, the wonders of modern technology allow us to kind of offer that kind of hybrid model. And talking about hybrid models, you know, there are some business owners that do a bit of both. You know, so part of their course might be delivered online and certain sessions in person. I guess it's a bit like my hypnobirthing training. Most of it's online, but we do have opportunities for in-person connection because we have our wonderful annual event, you know? So you can absolutely choose a more hybrid way of working that can work so well for so many business owners. Now, one of the things that we were talking about on my catch-up when this question was posed was the difference between pre-recorded and live. So what we've been talking about today on this episode of the podcast is more like live versus in person. So we're talking about not particularly the delivery, we're talking about kind of the way the person receives it. Is it via video call or whether it's in a person's room space? But actually what came up in this discussion at our catch-up was, do people want these services pre-recorded so they can access whenever feels right for them? And I think this is a whole different question. In the baby business world, absolutely, there are services that are pre-recorded that people can access how and when they choose. So there are some businesses that have produced their own online courses. So maybe it's a sleep consultant that offers a course on dealing with sleep regressions, and it's not delivered live, you know? It's been pre-recorded, and when people purchase it, they have access to it and they can dip in and out of it. Of course, this is huge in the hypnobirthing world too. You know, there are many business owners that have pre-recorded courses, and lots of people do access hypnobirthing via pre-recorded courses. And isn't it great that there is that option? Okay. As business owners though, we must not feel that our in-person services are competing with those pre-recorded services because it's different, It's completely different. And in fact, it often attracts a completely different buyer. Someone who buys a pre-recorded hypnobirthing course is probably someone very different from somebody who wants that in-person live course with an instructor where you can ask questions, where you've got that accountability. It's different. It's completely different. And there's so many services in the world that we can access that has been pre-recorded. So if I wanted to get fit, I could go on YouTube, couldn't I, and watch loads of fitness videos. Not going to do that. I'm not going to do any of these things, let's face it. Fitness is not my thing. But yeah, I couldn't I? If I wanted to, I could go onto YouTube and watch loads of fitness videos. I say watch like I'm just sat there on my sofa. I would be. I'd be just passively watching this person work out while I ate my bag of Seabrook crisps. But no, seriously, if I wanted to keep fit, get fit, I could do that. Or I could go to an in-person fitness class, couldn't I? Or I could get a one-on-one personal trainer. And all those 3 different classes would be hugely different, right? The experience that I'd be gaining from each of those things would be vastly different. The videos, well, it'd take a certain level of motivation for me to get up off the sofa and press on and do it, yeah? And there'd be no one checking in on me. If I came under a little bit of a confusion and what am I supposed to do here? Would this work for me? I've got no one to ask. Whereas going to that group class, the fact it's scheduled, the fact I've booked on, gives me accountability to actually do it. The in-person one, and that's what I'd need the in-person one, or I wouldn't do either of those 2 things. Perhaps it's someone that's going to knock on my door and be like, right, it's your session. The things would be tailored to me. I'd be able to ask 125 questions, wouldn't I? And I'd certainly have amazing accountability to do the in-between session stuff. That's exactly like your services too. If you were to pre-record something, there's a great deal of motivation, personal motivation that client needs to access and complete the course, right? A group course, they're partly there with that, partly there. And there's also the connection with the other people. The one-on-one service, completely bespoke and tailored to your client with a higher level of accountability. So that's another consideration. So when we're talking about online versus in person, please remember that delivered live is very different from pre-recorded. And I'm not saying any of these options are bad. They're not. They're not bad, and they work for different people. What I am saying is there's not a simple answer of what do clients want. Everyone's different. Now, one of the things that I said to the lovely lady that asked me this question was something that I really think it's so important we remember. Whatever you choose, however you choose to operate your business, you are able to create a demand for it. So what do I mean by that? Well, it's not as simple as what do people want? In actual fact, quite often people want what you offer and how you present it. So once upon a time, there was none of your services that you offer. It didn't exist as a thing. So let's think about hypnobirthing as an example. A couple of decades ago, hypnobirthing courses were not a thing. People were not accessing hypnobirthing at all, and then people started offering services, and no doubt in a one-on-one format. They created the demand for that. And then at some point, I'm sure hypnobirthing teachers were like, oh, could I do this in a group format? They created the demand for that by talking about how fabulous the benefits of accessing it in a group. And then more recently, business owners started talking about pre-recorded course, access at your own convenience. Yeah? And they created a demand for that. So remember that we do have power in this as business owners. It depends how we talk about it, the benefits of how we present our service. We can influence the demand that is there by talking about how wonderful accessing the service in this format is. So, as an example, if I taught hypnobirthing classes still, and I do very rarely, like to a friend or a family member, but mostly these days my business is training people to be hypnobirthing teachers and supporting them to build incredible businesses. But if I was a hypnobirthing teacher and I was like, right, all my classes now are going online. I'm going to be offering a group course online, and I'm going to be offering one-on-one services, but via Zoom, via Teams, whatever it may be. People would still know me, wouldn't they, as the one-on-one hypnobirthing teacher, the group course hypnobirthing teacher running these courses in my local area. Okay. What would I do to now create demand for it being virtual? Well, I'd talk about the benefits of it being like that. I wouldn't present it as like, sorry guys, no more in person, it's not working out for me anymore, so I'm going online, sorry about that. That just wouldn't make good business sense, would it? I would talk about the benefits for them, for those clients of the classes now being online. So I'd be talking about how excited I am that my services are now open to more potential clients. If you want to join my course from Canada, from America, from Ireland, from Scotland, you can, because my courses only require you to have an internet connection. Yeah? I'd talk about how they can, the benefit of them being online means they can access them in their PJs with their kids upstairs asleep. I'd really lean in to the benefits of them being online. And like I said, that would create the demand. And yes, there would be people that would be like, oh gosh, I really want it online. I really want it in person. So your classes are not for me. Again, totally okay. Because there would be people that would prefer online and vice versa. We're always going to lose people, and that's okay. So, I really hope this episode has got you thinking, and ideally, I really hope it's given you a bit of clarity and the permission slip that there's no right or wrong. There's absolutely no right or wrong in terms of how you decide to run your classes, how you decide to operate as a business, and that there are so many potential clients out there. You can absolutely create that demand, okay? Now, also, remember when I said that no decisions are forever, So it's not that you have to pick one or the other, and that's how what you stick with. You've made your decision, you stick with it. You can evolve, you can change with the seasons of your life, your client's life, all that. And you don't even have to make a decision, So if you're a new business owner and you're listening to this, so perhaps you're someone that's currently training to be a hypnobirthing teacher or an antenatal educator, or whatever, and you are like, oh gosh, what am I going to put out there? I want to tell people about my services, but what am I going to say? Am I going to say online or in person? Don't say either. Don't say either if you're not sure. And then, like I said, when someone gets in touch, you can make that decision together. You know? So many businesses, the best way to start is one-on-one. You know, it's the easiest way to get into things. Okay. Of course, this is a little bit different if you run baby classes, but if you run classes with the parents, with the expectant parents, ultimately a really straightforward way of getting into it is one-on-one, and you don't even have to declare whether that is in person or online, because you can make those arrangements after. If you want, you can write that in your marketing. You can write the services can be delivered in person, or if you live further afield or it's more convenient to you, we can absolutely do it by a video call. Again, making it so accessible to anybody that stumbles upon your wonderful service. So, I hope that has been useful. And as ever, have a gorgeous week. And I would love to know your experiences on this. What has worked for you as a business owner? In person, online, pre-recorded, live. What is working for you? What are you loving? Come over to my Instagram at loveyourbirth_training to let me know. And have a great week and keep on changing lives. Take care. Thank you for listening to Rockabye Revenue. I hope this episode has left you with some fresh ideas and bundles of motivation. If you enjoyed this episode, do make sure you click subscribe so you never miss an installment. And if you found this episode useful, I'd love you forever if you leave a 5-star review, helping this podcast reach the ears of more of the helpers in this world. And remember, keep changing lives. See you next time.